Hello and welcome, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us today. My name is Noemi Hermeking, and I am joined today by the very special and amazing author, Furkan Karayel. We will be talking about breaking down stereotypes with stories. Would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself, Furkan?
Sure. Thank you so much, Naomi. It's a pleasure to have this session with you today. My name is Furkan Karayel. I'm the founder of Diverse In and author of the book Inclusive Intelligence, How to Be a Role Model for Diversity and Inclusion in the Workplace. And I do full-time public speaking and keynote speaking as well. So that's me in a nutshell.
Okay, thank you for this introduction. For myself, for the ones who don't know, I'm actually an inclusion and diversity officer for Fortschritt Bayern in Germany, and I'm also an anthropologist and an intercultural trainer. Today's topic will be about the self and the other. Furkan actually came up with a wonderful quote. Maybe you can remind our listeners that quote, Furkan?
Yes, there are so many definitions out there about diversity and inclusion, and which is fantastic. And in my book, I use this definition, which is a simple one for everyone to remember. Diversity is you because you are unique. Inclusion is accepting you because you matter. Diversity basically means identifying and recognizing differences. Inclusion means bringing those differences together in a harmony way so that we can perform our best selves and become our best selves. So that's about it.
Okay, great. Sometimes I also like to add, because I work a lot in the field of disability inclusion. We've all heard the quote about, do you have a seat at the table? And I often ask the people then, well, actually, is the table accessible to everybody, right? So there's also something to keep in mind. We will not just talk about our own stories. We are also very much interested in your stories as well. And by that, I mean all the listeners today. So after our little introduction, we would actually like to invite our audience to the stage. It's quite simple. You see the little react button on the bottom of the page. So later on, if you would like to say something and share your story with us, you just have to raise your hand. And then, by clicking on this little icon, we actually know that somebody else would like to add something to the conversation. So anyway, I would say we start delving into this topic. As I said to some of you, I'm an anthropologist. So for me, actually, thinking about the self and the other is always quite important, or it's a subject that always comes up, because I think it's part of all of our identity construction. In, personal story, I would say, when I started to study Korean language and culture, it was kind of the first time over 20 years ago that I vividly remember, how it felt to be the other. It's interesting because afterwards I started to become an anthropologist, and I studied with various indigenous communities in the United States and in Canada. And again, during that ethnographic fieldwork, I was the other and I was the stranger again. And for myself, I must say that these moments, I kind of regard them as very important teaching lessons in my life, maybe even as disruptive key moments, because I was in a situation where I was the other and I was a minority, which is usually not the case when I'm here in Germany, actually. What about you, Furkan? What are your stories?
Thank you so much, Naomi, for sharing this. When I was thinking of when did I feel the most that I was the other, I am originally from Turkey, and I have studied in Turkey for 3 years. And before I come to Ireland as an Erasmus exchange student, I was a bit like afraid to be seen as the other. Yes, I was coming from another background, and I look different, and I sound different in my accent and everything. So it was a bit like a scary moment. But on the other side, we had this Erasmus culture. So many people were like other, or the richness that the otherness brings into the table was something that I truly enjoyed. And on the other side, when I started my own business, one thing I realized that we on the media always look up to the people, successful people who are really good at things, who are good at the language and everything. I was looking for particularly role models for myself, for people whose English is the second language, for example. Then I've seen Ariana Huffington. She was a good role model. She was a person who had her accent as well, and she was very good on her business. And years later, after I gained my confidence being the other, or being associating myself with part of the community, that during the COVID times we were giving an opportunity to have a mentorship by a business leader to get us to online. And this mentor recommended some good things to everyone. And when he came to me and he said, I recommend you to record your online course with somebody with a Canadian or an Irish accent, and he said, and I straight away felt that being the other hit me there again, because none of these things was recommended to the other people in the room, and this is something completely against what I was standing for diversity and inclusion. And that moment made me feel like, oh my God, this is something that I'm not taking away. And on the other side, this is made me feel like the other again. And I think, we position ourselves, and our uniqueness shine within those diversity, and gaining our confidence in that uniqueness, and owning to that uniqueness and the differences that we bring on the table. And I absolutely love the quote from Martin Luther King Jr., "The self cannot be self without the other selves." What do you think?
Well, I must say thanks for sharing your story. And I think it's a great example when you talked about the accent and this recommendation of the other person, because it actually shows us that, when we start to classify people into self and other, right? So it's kind of like your own culture or a different culture or foreign culture. These categorizations can quickly actually turn into stereotypes and into prejudices, right? And then it, of course, makes this intercultural encounters very difficult. And there are various research actually that has shown that, if we start othering, and ethnic and racial stereotyping comes along with us, there's actually an empathy gap, for example, in healthcare, right? And we realize that not everyone gets the same treatment, right? And again, to talk or to bring in an example of disability inclusion, we are actually a company that also we try to implement, of course, diversity as much as possible. And we are an inclusive organization with various very qualified people who work with us as well. And they also happen to actually have a disability. And unfortunately, many of my colleagues will tell me that they oftentimes have to face discrimination on a daily basis because they actually have a disability. I have a great colleague. She has a master's degree. And once she was finished with her master, there was somebody who told her, well, why don't you actually, stop working altogether, right? I mean, why would you do that? I mean, everybody knows that, it gives structure to your life and everybody wants to achieve something, right? So we can see that, of course, specifically when we work with minority groups and the people with disabilities are actually the biggest minority group worldwide. They are one of the groups as well who have to face a lot of discrimination. I mean, of course, they are not the only ones. I've also worked with indigenous communities, etc., etc. But it's something that we shouldn't forget, that once we talk about the self and the other, we can also see to some degrees how the person or the other person is so far away that we forget that these people also have their own stories.
That's a very good point, Naomi. And when we think of the other person, I'm always asking in my workshops that who is the other, who is the really, really, really other person for us, and what are the commonalities we have with them, and what are the differences we have. And sometimes we are actually maybe we have more commonalities between them and us rather than the differences. It's always good to think of that, who is the other, and then why are they other for us, and what my belief and perception make that person an other for us. And same thing applies to different intersectionality, to people with disabilities, indigenous people, or people with different races, with different looks and different needs. So it all applies to them, who are the others, and what makes them the other within our perception.
And I think on the other hand, we shouldn't forget that the other person cannot be that different, because otherwise we wouldn't recognize them anymore,
Absolutely.
So, what do you think, Furkan? Should we ask our audience if somebody wants or would like to share their story with us, where they felt the self and the other? Is this?
Yeah, I'm very curious to hear anybody who would like to join. Please put the reaction of hands up, and we get you to the stage and listen to you. I see 18 people already here. Fantastic. And what do you think, everybody? Welcome Vincent, Emirhan, Liliana, Emilia, Anika, Nadine, Dorothea, Sumaya, Rajesh, Katrina, Oya, Stephanie, Syra, Anna, John, Gerline, Lisa, Alicia. So everyone, welcome. I'm looking very, very curious about your thoughts on it as well.
Otherwise, I would suggest we continue until somebody, wants to join the stage, and just don't forget to use the react button so we know that you want to share something. What I thought was interesting as well, is specifically when we think back about the stereotypes. You probably have heard about the study, the Heidi and Howard study, right? I think it came out in 2003, and this study actually tested the perception of women and men in the workforce. And interestingly, the study demonstrated that the difference between likability and success for men and women, and the more successful a man was, actually, the greater his likability, and the more successful a woman was, the worse her likability. Is that actually something that you have felt as well? I'm asking you because, you're an author, you're also an entrepreneur as well. Is that something that, you came across as well, that people actually put you in that category?
That's a very good point, Naomi. How we perceive people and identities based on their success. It I think depends on who do you have around. Personally speaking, I didn't get that during my business, but during my studies, yes, when somebody was a bit more academically successful, especially if they are females, I have seen that the perception, at least from the talks around, was the conversation was changing a little bit. And have you experienced it any way, Naomi?
That is a good question. Well, we talked a little bit about it last time as well. I must say I have actually experienced it in several occasions. I don't know if it's only because I'm a woman, and I think, the aspect of intersectionality comes in here. But I oftentimes, specifically during my various employments that I had, or also during my studies, I oftentimes had male advisors. And I could see actually that our conversation was very different, I must say. Also, when I had a male advisor or a female advisor. So that's something that I actually realized. But I think it also teaches us, that we oftentimes, or that we have to be remembered, or I think our role, both your role, I would say, and also myself, is to kind of create more awareness, and kind of try to unlearn and question actually what it is we define the norm, quote unquote, right? Because we have all been socialized, right? And, in the field of anthropology, you would talk about ethnocentrism, etc., etc. But I think it's very important that we think about the self, the other, and the way we have been socialized, because only by kind of unlearning that and also questioning that, we kind of can, let's say, bricolage, a new work culture, and also make it more just, I would say. What do you think?
Yes, you're right. And how did we learn it at the first place is something very interesting that led me to think. And on the other side, there is a stereotype content model introduced by Susan Fisk and Yoon Ju, Peter Glick, and Amy Cuddy in 2002, a research that I have been looking at it already today. Let me share it with you as well. It says that based on people's warmth and competence, we judge and stereotype people. And warmth, it means that approachability, friendliness, type of warmth, when we feel warmth. And the high, in the graph it says, if we position somebody in high in the warmth and in competence, we admire them. And on the other side, we have low warmth and high competence. We show envious prejudice. And in the competence level, a high competence and low warmth, we produce paternitical prejudice. And on the other side, low warmth and low competence, contemptuous prejudice we produce. And I think it's very important to recognize all these differences, how we perceive their warmthness and the competence, as well as how it can actually be changed based on the conversation we maybe previously have, or an interview they previously had within the media that gives that warmthness, and how it's changing from one side to another. And that's, I find it very interesting.
Yeah, maybe you could actually, put that information or the author under our LinkedIn Live, so people can actually, read about it if they want to know more about it. I was just thinking that Iris Bonnet also wrote a lot about the different stereotypes about men and women. And sometimes, when I give workshops about these subjects, I probably some of you or most of you actually have heard about this idea. If you're not sure actually if something is very inclusive, the way you talk about it, there is this idea that you can actually flip it to test it, right? So if you say something about a woman, see if the same statement actually makes sense also about a man, or if you would say something about a black candidate, or would you say the same thing about a white candidate, right? So if you flip the situation, and if it still makes, and look at it, if it still makes sense or not, because it might really reveal some biases, when you do that. So I think that's always something, easy to do. But anyway, that is just an idea for our listeners, if they need something hands-on. I see that we're actually already running out of time. I'm happy to see that actually there's so many more stories that we want to share in the future. Can you maybe tell our audience about our next LinkedIn Live and what our subject will be?
Sure. I'm also very excited for our second episode, which is going to be about be yourself, everyone else is taken, which is a fantastic inspirational quote from Oscar Wilde. And we're going to be talking about, how does this impact us being ourselves and everyone else is taken, about authenticity, and do we need to change at work to fit into work, or how does authenticity work in the workplace? And it's going to be happening within a month on the 19th of March. So please stay with us. And if you haven't connected with us, please do. And we look forward to hearing your story as well about this topic. Thank you so much for joining again.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining again. And I'm happy, and I look forward to listen to all of your stories next time. And in the meantime, I hope that you have a good start of the week. And if you have any questions or other stories you would like to tell, please connect with us, and let's talk soon. Thanks so much. Have a great day. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.